Welcome, everyone. I'm Jesse Mogul, and thank you for tuning in to the American Contingency Podcast. Here at AmCon, we are a united nationwide community of dedicated Americans ready to face any challenge that comes our way. Our mission is to inform you by equipping you with the knowledge and training you need to prepare for any human-made or natural disaster. Through active participation in our community, you'll have the opportunity to grow by learning from others' experiences and sharing your own. Together, we build resilience and strength through shared knowledge and mutual support. And as always, it is an honor and a privilege to have you here for the next 30 minutes or so. And I am going to put actionable attention towards getting us out of here in about 30 minutes because we've got busy lives. There's a lot of things that we want to be doing with our day. And because September is our outdoor skills month, and we're doing the American Contingency Adventure Challenges in many different regions of the country as we start to move into fall. In fact, the Northeast is having theirs within, I believe, the next week, and the Southeast is having theirs the weekend of October 5th up in Tennessee, and I'll be attending that. I'm very excited to be able to bring back some video and some interviews and pictures and things of that nature from this American Contingency Adventure Challenge, since I do so much of that on my own business side, being able to be out there and take pictures of people and really be able to get in there and explain to everybody what we're doing with this, so that next year, if you haven't attended the American Contingency Adventure Challenge in 2024, you can get yourself excited and start going through the trainings in 2025 to be prepared for that one. If you're not a member of American Contingency yet, then I highly recommend you go over to AmericanContingency.com. I will put that in the show notes. Easy to find. You can learn more about us. There's lots of links about the American Contingency Adventure Challenge, as well as updates in our blog content down at the bottom. And you can, of course, find ways to join. I mean, it's like less than the cost of a value meal at a fast food restaurant. Like, we are not pushing up our prices because of inflation yet. We are trying our best to take care of our business over here without making it cost more for you, the potential member or the already member, to be a part of American Contingency. And what we're going to discuss today is outdoor skills. But before we do that, it's so interesting when we talk about contingencies and preparedness. And something came across my news feed not too long ago about Rancho Palos Verdes in this whole area of Southern California that is having these landslides and this ground movement that is literally causing whole communities and neighborhoods to have their utilities shut off because of concerns that if massive earthquake, if landslides were to, swallow up 40, 50, 100 houses. And that's how big some of these neighborhoods are that have been shut off. I mean, literally, they've got no water, no electricity, no gas. Everything's shut off. These people are being put out of their homes. It's not like there's a budget to help them out. And while that is relatively a rich community, I'm using air quotes here, just because there's a lot of wealth by some members of that community does not mean that there's wealth for all the members of that community. And so if you start shutting down 40, 50, 100 houses at a time because of potential earthquakes and landslides that could cause wildfires, gas leaks, explosions, things of that nature, how do you prepare for something like that? I mean, we could go back in time and not buy a home in a place like that, but it wasn't until, I think, within the last year or so that the ground movement and the landslides and those really absurd levels of rainfall that North and South California had, I think it was about a year or two ago, where a lot of these issues began to come to light. And now all of a sudden it's an issue that these people have to face. And if you hope that if you were in this position, you would have the financial means to be able to generate yourself somewhere else and be able to set up. The issue that I keep talking about with some of my friends who still live out there is that you can't sell your home now. And if that was where you were putting a lot of your savings, now all of a sudden you've got a house that no one's going to want to buy because it's in an area that basically is just waiting for the next natural disaster to hit it, and then everything's going to slide into the ocean or fall into a big crevasse. And so I just found it when this story came across. I got super deep into it and started reading all this information, and by all means, go Google Rancho Palos Verdes. utilities shut off. There's a ton of articles. Sadly, most of the news sites now are so clickbaity with all their ads that they really don't function very well on a computer, and you'd be better off trying to do it on your cell phone because it becomes so cumbersome. And a lot of them are coming from, news sources that might have an ulterior motive for why they're even writing the things that they're writing. So you're going to have to be very mindful of where you're getting your information from. And I read multiple articles about this and had to shut down my Safari multiple times because the little ads and pop-ups that they want to have on these news sites just become so cumbersome to the operating system that it almost makes it not even fun to try to read these articles. I'm not really sure what their end game is with that, because if your news site is not only, to me, going to sway the article either left or right, I'm already not really sure I want to be reading your information to begin with, because I'd rather just news. Like, drop the adjectives. I've noticed that. I'm going to get over to the outdoor skills, and I'm not going to stick on this subject too long, but something that I have noticed is that back in the day, and we're talking, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, when I was a journalism major and thought I wanted to make a career in that, I remember writing these articles in college and sending them over to the various newspapers that were in my area to be published. And one of the things that the editors would come back oftentimes and ask for me to change would be my usage of adjectives. That it's not, this absurd comment was made by this politician. This horrible thing happened in this one small town. It was this thing happened in this town. Cut the adjectives. Allow the reader to make their own decisions about whether what was said was absurd or whether this is a small town or whether this was a horrendous event that occurred there. We are simply just telling people this thing happened in this place and this was the aftermath and this is what occurred. And what you'll notice is that a lot of this clickbaity stuff, and this happens really a lot. We'll watch it on television, especially with the politics thing going on right now with the election coming up. There's a use of adjectives that already puts a thought into your head about which way you should think about this. And whether you're watching Fox News or MSNBC or CNBC or CNN, they're going to use their adjectives in a very different way on how, of course, they're going to be telling the story differently, but now they're also using their adjectives differently. And so it was very interesting reading all these different articles about Rancho Palos Verdes and noticing how the different publications would utilize their adjectives in such a way to really try to push you to either it being the homeowner's fault that they even own a house there, or the city's fault for shutting off the utilities, or the earth's fault for causing this problem to begin with. And it's just very interesting. I would highly recommend you start to notice adjectives and how those adjectives are seeking to sway your opinion about something. Now, I'm going to be using a lot of adjectives in this podcast because we're going to be talking about outdoor skills. And I did want to bring up Rancho Palos Verdes because I just thought about how horrendous that must be for those homeowners and those people in the community to have to now figure out where they're going to live and what they're going to do with their future when a lot of their financial means were more than likely tied up in their homes. And that's probably a situation that a lot of us are in, where our biggest investment that we have in our lives is the house that we live in. And if all of a sudden that became uninhabitable, we were no longer able to live in our home and we could not sell this home, what would we then do? Right? If I just all of a sudden had to keep paying the mortgage I'm paying on this house, because that's just what I have to do, but I can no longer live in this house, that's going to eat up a substantial portion of my income and leave me with very little resources to find a new place to live. And that's what these people are facing there. And it's interesting if you type in current disasters into the internet, in current disasters and FEMA. There's a whole page where FEMA has listed of the current disasters that are happening in the country. And right now I'm looking at it, and they're talking about the Hurricane Debbie in Florida, Tropical Storm Debbie in Pennsylvania. Kentucky has some severe storms. Texas has Hurricane Beryl. This is just what's on here. I didn't click on any of the links. I'm not sure how pertinent any of this is currently to the people living in these areas, but Rancho Palos Verdes is not even on here. And to me, I would think that it is absolutely a disaster scenario whenever you have people who are being told that they can no longer have utilities in their homes. They're not even necessarily being told that they have to leave. although there have been evacuations that have been mandatory in certain neighborhoods and communities. But some of these people are just being told, well, you don't necessarily have to leave, but we're not supplying any electricity, any water, or any gas to your homestead anymore. So good luck with that. Just what would you do in that situation? I'm not really sure what kind of contingencies you could have in place if you all of a sudden had to continue paying on a mortgage but no longer could live in that home. That just seems like a sad state of affairs for the people living in those communities. And that breaks me up for them. So I just wanted to give a little shout out to Rancho Palos Verdes. Anybody who knows anybody out there, just, what would you do if all of a sudden you had to find yourself not being able to live in your home, but yet you had to keep paying on that mortgage and all your financial means and your investments, and so much of your future potential wealth was being tied up in a house that you couldn't sell to anyone because nobody's buying a home in an area where landslides and earthquakes could literally slide houses off mountains. So a shame there, and maybe these people will start living outside, and in this case they should definitely listen to this podcast episode, because outdoor skills is something that we talk a lot about here. And as I'm building these out, and as I was writing all the blogs about this for the month of September, I tried really hard not to have all of these seem like we were going to throw a rucksack on our back and go hike 20 miles into this absurd wilderness where, wildlife still roams free and we are no longer the top of the food chain. For a lot of us, we're just simply trying to throw some gear in a bag and then, go climb up a cool, fun little mountain for an hour or two, have a quick little sandwich up at the top, and then come back down, get in our car, and be sleeping in our house by the end of the night. Now, I do understand that a lot of people want to go out and they want to do some hiking, and maybe they want to do the wilderness tent thing where they're going to stay overnight in a really cool area. But for a majority of us, when we think about going outdoors and enjoying things, we're not going too far off the beaten path. We're not hiking 10, 20 miles in, where if we don't have water, if we were to sprain our ankle, we would seriously be in a situation where we would need to be airlifted out of that. Certainly, you might be one of those people who likes to put yourself in that situation, and so a lot of this information might just be a review for you, or you might listen to me and say, this dude has no idea what he's talking about because he's never gone 50 miles into, the Appalachian forest and had to survive off of only what is in his backpack, and that is true. I have never done that. Although hiking the Appalachian Trail does sound like a heck of a good time, if you go during certain points in time of the year, there's a lot of people around you, and so you wouldn't necessarily be stranded if you were to hurt yourself. But what we're going to specifically cover today are 3 primary topics about gear and mobility, navigating, and of course just survival, food, water, and shelter essentials whenever we do go out there. Because if you do want to do something outdoors and you find yourself in a situation where your gear, your navigation, or any of the essentials in the food, water, shelter area are not covered, even if you're just out for the night or out for the day and you still plan on being in your car and back home safely in your bed at night, you could find yourself in a bit of spot of bother. And we want to be able to go outside and enjoy nature and be able to do it for relatively in a controlled manner, where if something were to go sideways, we would not be too far away from services. Now, of course, we want to be self-sufficient, and being self-sufficient does require we're carrying certain types of gear, and we know how to, let's say, put on a tourniquet, which I'm not covering here, but I definitely covered in the blogs. We would know how to put on a splint or build makeshift crutches for somebody if they were to sprain their ankle. These are certainly things that you'd want to look into if you knew you were going to go deep into the woods. Again, for the most part, most of us are just trying to do these little day trips. Drive somewhere, throw on a backpack, hike up a mountain, hike into the woods, see a cool waterfall, come back out, go get ourselves some lunch, and be home in time enough for, streaming television. So that's what we're going to discuss today, is just all the different things that you could have in your backpack, and then we'll leave it on that and see what you are able to do. It is fall. A lot of us want to get outside. The absurd temperatures that many of us were dealing with over the summer have started to abate, and now we're finding that the temperatures are more conducive to going outside and having a good time whenever we're seeing more of those 60, 70, 80 degree days as compared to the 90, 100. And if you're in the American Southwest, you have certainly experienced those 110 plus days, probably not going hiking very much. Although maybe, the likelihood that you would run into a snake when it's 116 degrees in Phoenix is probably lessened than it would be if it was 82 degrees. So always keeping an eye on where your feet are stepping is important. I remember hiking in California multiple times and always keeping an eye on the ground. And I remember almost stepping on a snake, and it wasn't a rattler, but it definitely had markings that made me think at first it was. And it camouflaged so well into the ground that I was literally 2 steps away from stepping right on top of that snake, and I guarantee you that snake would not have been happy about that. So let's talk about some essential gears. Now, when I think about gear, one of the first things that came to mind when I just started talking about snakes is that there are actual things that you can put over your shoes that make it so that if a snake tries to bite through your shoe, that it's no longer able to do that. And I can't tell you the name of that product right now. I didn't have that in the show notes, but it did come to mind because I've talked to somebody who hikes where there's a lot of snakes, and they actually put things over their boots and around like the first 2 or 3 feet of their leg, so that if a snake were to try to snap, it would not be able to bite through and get to the skin. So you might want to Google, snake protective devices for shoes and legs if you are prone to being a person who hikes in areas where there are a lot of snakes. Another thing that's very handy would be a multi-purpose tool. I know a lot of us understand what a Swiss Army knife is. We carry these multi-purpose tools. They might have a pliers, knife, little tiny saw or screwdriver. There's products by Leatherman and of course the whole Swiss Army knife brand has different kinds of functionalities on these, sometimes in the 10, 15, 20 different items on something. If you think you're going to be out there and wanting to start a fire, of course, make sure that it's safe to do so and that the conditions aren't too dry and you know how to build a fire pit. But I think we've covered that in blogs and on the podcast before. Building a shelter, cutting branches, repairing gear is going to be substantially easier with the multi-pack tool. One of the things I have noticed when I've gone to use mine in the past is that if you don't frequently get out certain items in the multi-pack tool, they actually can be quite difficult to get out. So I've started to carry like a tiny little metal piece, just something that, have another multi-pack tool, if you will, or something that would allow you to get into this multi-useful tool and be able to basically pry open the thing that you need. I've seen some people spray WD-40 on there to loosen up the tool so that they come out a little bit better. But do be mindful that if you buy a brand new multi-purpose tool, that it could be extremely tight and it may be difficult for you to pull out certain of the tools that you want to use at a given time. And if you're just trying to use your fingernails and you don't have anything that could get into those small little holes, like a pair of tweezers work really well for this. You can get these little tweezers in there, and now you're able to get the little tool popped up enough that now your finger can get under it and completely pull it up. So if you've got a new multi-purpose tool, make sure that you practice opening up all of the items that are in there, regardless of whether you think you'll need them or not. You just don't know until you know that you need it, and you definitely don't want to be in a situation where now you're trying to open up a brand new multi-purpose tool without having practiced how to get each one of them open. And again, tweezers or some little small thin metal device that could get up underneath there and pull them out. Also, lightweight shelters, whatever kind of tarp you decide to carry, oftentimes can be placed underneath the rucksack and not actually inside of it. And you can do this if you buy a really cool hike and backpack. Oftentimes it can be affixed with ropes or bungee cords so that now it's underneath, which is also very good if you go to sit your backpack down and the ground's a little wet. Now you're not getting your backpack wet as well, and you've got the tarp on the outside. So if you want to sit down real fast to take a quick little break, you're not having to dig through your rucksack in order to achieve this goal. Not to mention that if you do need to build a shelter for rain or any of the conditions that may occur while you're out and about, not only is the tarp going to be easy to get to, but now you absolutely have a tarp, which can take up a substantial amount of space inside of a rucksack. And so you want to be able to get to it quickly. And again, if you have the right kind of multi-purpose tool, you could begin to cut off branches to trees and build yourself a little A-frame shelter. Again, I would highly recommend that you practice doing some of this stuff in the safety of your backyard, which I'm absolutely going to get into when we start talking about tents and that when we get down into shelter. But I will absolutely you know what? I'm just going to bring it up now. If you're not practicing how to set up your tent in your driveway or your backyard before you go out into the woods to do this, I've got to start questioning the absurdity of that thought process. Even if you've set up this tent multiple times, but now let's say it's a new season or you haven't set it up in 6, 9, 12 months, set the tent up in your backyard or in your driveway to, one, make sure that you have all the appropriate accessories that make sure that the tent goes up the way that it's meant to go up. And two, it's really just getting yourself a little bit more practice, get that muscle memory back into you. When I teach people how to change their spare tires, we do it in their driveway in perfect conditions when the tire isn't even flat. But being able to learn it in those kind of conditions, and then we put the tire back on, and then we do it again, and we do it again, and we do it again, because this is how my dad taught me how to change my tire. And we lived on a family farm, so we didn't even have a asphalt or concrete driveway, so I was already dealing with not level conditions, so it was actually quite helpful whenever the jack would slip out from underneath the car because I didn't put it in there right. Now the tire had air, it was able to catch itself, and I didn't get injured. And I remember him having me practice this multiple times. This is actually where I learned the setting up the tent in the backyard thing, is before we would go out on Boy Scout trips, he would always have us set up the tent. I'd be like, dude, we just did this a month ago. He's like, and we're going to do it again now to make sure that we're fully prepared when we get out there. So when we're talking about shelter, if you are carrying a tent, I would highly recommend you practice setting that up in your backyard, as well as if you think that you might just want to use your tarp and build an A-frame for a lean-to or something to that. I would highly recommend that you practice doing that in your backyard as well, because you might need to dig tiny little holes with your multi-purpose tool in order to put the wood, the branches down into those holes so that it can maintain its structural integrity rather than trying to figure this out on the side of a mountain while it's raining. I'm just saying. You do with that information as you will. Also, convertible clothing. I'm a huge fan of quick drying layers that touch my skin. Also, ones that can change their functionality. So I've got hiking pants that have zippers so that I can unzip the bottom part of the leg and turn them into shorts, and then just as easily zip the little leg thing back on, and now they're pants again. They've got cargo pockets, lots of different pockets. If you're going out there and you're like, I want to look super, fashionable, and I don't want a ton of pockets, and cargo pockets in pants are not fashionable, and I don't want to do that. You're in the woods, so GQ and any of those other magazines that might paparazzi you in your normal day-to-day life are not going to be doing that up in the mountains. So wear appropriate clothing that has lots of pockets, because you're going to want to be able to get to certain things quicker than always having to take off your backpack. So it's just an idea. You do with it as you will, but if it's pants zipping into shorts or cargo with lots of pockets, you want to be able to have an opportunity for your clothing to convert. Obviously, you could wear a short sleeve shirt that wicks away moisture with a long sleeve shirt that also wicks away moisture, and have those be your two base layers. And then you could have a lightweight jacket. And there's a lot, and they are a little bit expensive if you go to those REI outdoor adventure type stores, but they can be extremely lightweight and yet also maintain your body temperature in a very efficient way. And we're looking for clothing that we take on these hikes that is effective in its job, and less obviously color coordinated if you're that fashionable. I'm not telling you to wear ridiculous colors here, but just understand that what you take out there needs to be essential and not overweigh your backpack. A lot of the research I've done states that we usually don't want our backpack to be more than 20% of our weight, but for 100 pounds, that's a 20-pound backpack. If you're 200 pounds, that's a 40-pound backpack. And if your back isn't used to carrying 20 or 40 pounds for hours on end, you might find yourself in a little bit of pain, especially around the shoulders and the trapezoid area up there around your neck, because you haven't practiced having that kind of weight on your back. I have a weighted vest that I wear whenever I do a lot of my walking that just gets my back trained to having heavy things on it, not to mention, it's helps me to just build up strength in my upper body and in my core and my lower back by being able to take weight off and on of this weighted vest. So again, this was a couple $100 and it was a Christmas present many years ago, but I take really good care of it, and you wouldn't even know that it was a day old. But it's absolutely something that I utilize even in my own office, walking on my walking treadmill that's below my stand-up desk, just to throw some extra weight on, just to get a little bit more calories burned while I'm doing my walking. So practice carrying a backpack with a substantial amount of weight in it, so that the first time you decide to go out with your friends and want to throw 20 pounds on your back, it's not the first time you've done that in 5 months, and now your back or your posture isn't prepared for it, and now you have lower back pain or your core is weakened and you just don't feel well while you're going on this trip. So be mindful of how much your backpack weighs, and what feels okay to carry around in your backyard for 20 minutes may not feel okay to walk up a mountain with for 3 hours. So it's really important you do that. Speaking of the backpack, we want to put the heaviest items closest to the back so that your center of gravity is maintained around the core of your body. So think about your water. When I went and hiked the San Jacinto Mountain a couple years back, I took a lot of water and a lot of different protein bars and stuff like that. And again, this was a 6-hour hike up, 4-hour hike down. We knew we were going to be able to make it back to the car. There was a whole trail. There was people everywhere. It was not hard. It was hard physically, but it was not hard to maintain the path and to know that if something were to go sideways, that there would be people around to help. And I still made sure that I put all of my water in very specific locations. In fact, something interesting that I learned on this trip was that because we were going up the trail and coming back down the same trail, what me and my hiking buddy started to do, because it was about, I think it was about 6,000, 7,000 feet up. So every 1,500 feet of elevation, we had an elevation counter on our watches that was able to maintain our time and elevation and everything else for the hike. About every 1,500 feet of elevation, we would take one of our water bottles and we would hide it off in the woods underneath leaves and things of that nature, so that we weren't carrying the water all the way up and it was waiting for us when we came back down. And if this is something that you've ever thought of and you've done, then surely you know how beneficial that was, because I carried a lot of water. I carried a bottle of water for every single hour and a half. I figured out the math and was like, this is how much water I want to consume. So I went up there and I started this hike with about 1.5 gallons to 2 gallons of water in my backpack in various different kinds of bottles. I even had one of those little rubber pads that was up against my body with a little straw that came out. And so we started dropping off our water bottles as we climbed up the mountain on this path, and we were able to pick up the water bottles as we came back down. So that substantially lessened the amount of weight that was in the rucksack that we were carrying. Obviously, we want to be thinking about whether we're going to have a tent, whether we're going to have food, what kind of food is going to get smashed. Is it okay to get smashed? If you're trying to take potato chips up there, then obviously keep that up to the top and not smashable. But if it's protein shakes in little cardboard cartons and water bottles that are plastic with lids that seal, then obviously those things can go up against the body in the backpack a little bit more, and they can actually create an entire straight line. If your backpack doesn't come with some sort of natural hard barrier in the back that is able to not have things poking at you, you want to be thinking about how you're packing the backpack so things aren't poking you in the back. A lot of people will throw bottles of water in their backpack and not realizing that as that shifts over the course of a couple of hours, then now all of a sudden they're getting something poking in their back, which again, for 20 minutes in your backyard doesn't seem like a big deal. 4 hours up at San Jacinto Mountain absolutely is a big deal. Packing your essential items for quick access like maps, snacks, rain gear, those are going to want to be in other pockets. I've seen some amazing backpacks where you can use varying kinds of attachments to have all these different carabiners can just attach all these different kind of bags up against your backpack, so that you could have one for your first aid gear, you could have one for your navigation supplies, so that your hiking buddy could just simply take the carabiner, pop this thing off, hand it to you, and now you have access to your maps, your compass, and so many of these things are now available on our phones or on our watches that we could buy. That obviously a map is something that could go in your pocket. You can have a compass on your phone that tells you where to go. You don't even need to have access to the internet or Wi-Fi in order to access the compass on your phone, although a battery backup would be extremely important. If you're taking your cell phone up there and you intend to use it for any of these kind of survival methods that it's been set up for, like the compass or the elevation gain or the step counter or whatever that might be, a $50 battery backup that could charge your phone up 3-4 times would certainly be beneficial for you you and anybody else if you guys start to run out of battery, and now all of a sudden you need to be able to recharge that. Especially if you're going to take photos and videos while you're up there, that stuff will eat through your battery a lot faster than you realize whenever you are nowhere near an electrical outlet. And then take time to test and adjust your backpack, especially before a long hike. Make sure you know what all is going to go in there. Walk around with it is for, maybe an hour or two in your backyard. Maybe you pack up your backpack and then go mow your lawn and just see what it's like to have that strapped to your back while you're trying to do a manual labor thing, because it's extremely important that it's adjusted for your height and how much weight's being carried into it. An important thing that I learned many years ago is that I only hike with backpacks that also have a zipper that goes that would go vertical, like the height of the bag, because then you can unzip that and you're able to get to items that are lower in the bag without having to take everything out. Another helpful tip on that regard would be, instead of having the backpack right side up, I place it on its side. So then when I go to unzip it, gravity is working differently on everything, and instead of pushing everything down onto the bottom thing I need, now everything is laid out sideways so that I'm able to get to things without the weight of the bag pushing down on that item I need at the very bottom. Another tip that I came across on my own one time on accident, because I just happened to be packing up in my garage and I had a bunch of cardboard boxes that were laying around, is that if I want to have extra clothing or any kind of gear, I separate it with little pieces of cardboard that are cut to the exact measurements of my backpack. So then when I go to put in another pair of pants or a shirt or food items or anything at all, everything is separated by a little tiny piece of cardboard, so that when I want to get in there, I just need to merely push the cardboard apart. Now I can get the item out, and this keeps a piece of clothing from pulling all the other clothing out of the backpack at the same time. Now it's just all these little pieces of cardboard, so when I go to open it back up, again, on its side, so gravity's working for me, not against me, now I just need to push those two little pieces of cardboard apart and then slide that piece of clothing right back in. Instead of it dragging on other clothing items, it's just pushing up against these pieces of cardboard. And I just find that getting gear in and out of the backpack with the backpack on its side and utilizing this cardboard method has just caused me a lot of less aggravation. None of the things that I just mentioned about having the backpack on its side or the cardboard necessarily, what am I trying to say here? I'm looking for less opportunities for things to annoy me or aggravate me when I'm up there. And if I go to pull a shirt out and it messes up all the other clothing that I had rolled up and put in the backpack in a very nice way, now all of a sudden I'm dealing with that, which could shift the entire weight of the backpack. It could cause items to be settling differently. Now all the effort I put into making sure this backpack was set up for a long hike could potentially be thrown askew simply because I wanted to take something out of it and it caused other items to shift. This little side, putting the backpack on its side and using the cardboard idea has allowed those annoyances to no longer occur as frequently. There's going to be times when things are still going to go a bit sideways, but certainly this method I just described is absolutely going to save you a lot of headache and aggravation when you're up there and you just want to get something out of the bag real fast, zip it back up, and get it back on your bag, because all your people are still hiking and all you wanted to do was just grab out a snack bar or grab out a lightweight jacket to throw on while everyone's hiking. Not everyone's always going to stop for you just because you need to get something out of your bag, especially when we're on a trail where you can see everybody going up. Let everybody else maintain their momentum upward while you stop and get things out of your bag extremely effectively and efficiently. And I realize we're already at 30 minutes and I've still got like 2 more sections to go, but I think that, this is where we're at with this. So although some of this navigating stuff, whether it's map orientation, taking your bearings, or knowing how to backtrack, can be important when you're actually going to be hiking on trails where there aren't as many markers, where maybe you are off trail and you are the one creating your own pathway. When you're hiking, you want to be checking your position against rivers, peaks, and trail markers so that you understand right out the gate, even at the base of the mountain or wherever you start, hey, this is where that peak is, this is where that cell phone tower is, this is where that river is. So if for some reason we are to get separated, we are going to be able to find ourselves back where we need to meet up. Again, most of us probably aren't doing that kind of deep woods hiking that this would be more beneficial for, but still taking your bearings with your compass, understanding distant landmarks, it will help you maintain a direction, whether the terrain is difficult or the trail disappears. If you have ever taken a triangulation class and you understand how to take your bearings from two known points so that you can now figure out where you are in that triangle, that's extremely helpful. And then, of course, backtracking, leaving visual markers like piles of rocks or tied ribbons around trees. I'm a big fan of having a bit of a roll of duct tape that goes with me, and it's not that full roll. We have one that has been used quite frequently, so there's a lot less on it, but that's the one that goes on the hiking trail, and that can actually be attached with like a little tiny bungee on the outside of the bag. It doesn't even have to take up space inside the backpack, and it's also able to be gotten to really quickly in case somebody, drops and breaks something and they need some tape. You just never know when you're going to need duct tape, and I'd be willing to bet if you're trying to build an A-frame during a storm, duct tape to attach those branches would be super helpful. I mean, I know there are those of you out there who can take ropes and wrap them around and do cool things with them. I don't have that skill, but duct tape is definitely a skill that I have. When we left our water bottles along that trail at San Jacinto in California, we used rocks in order for us to be reminded of where they were. And we just left them in the shape of crosses because that would be pretty obvious, across rocks. Not to mention there would be I remember there was one where it was like this tiny little waterfall, not big at all, but it was like literally off the side, super tiny. But that was our marker of like, oh, okay, this is where we left one of them. And then off the woods, like 10, 15 feet off the trail, we had created this little cross with rocks. And so, again, no one's probably going to go over there and try to mess up a cross on a hiking trail, and that was able to signify to us that's where our water bottles were hidden. So this way we were able to retrace our steps and get right back to where we wanted to go. This is where situational awareness is extremely important. That 360-degree rule, every 15 to 30 minutes, really just look around and understand where the trail's going, where the trail came from. Are there any water sources? Can you hear anything nearby? Are there signs of wildlife? You can find scat and footprints that will generally tell you if there's any kind of wildlife around. Not to mention a little bit of studying ahead of time will let you know, is this a place where there might be a coyote or a fox that could be around? Are there potentials to run into raccoons or any other kind of feral animal that, if you were to startle it, might want to come at you? Staying oriented is extremely important, and I know we live in a culture where cell phones sort of say, listen to music anytime you want to. When you're out and about in the woods, if you do want to listen to music, I certainly enjoy that, but I do it with one earbud in and one earbud out, and I keep the music at a minimum so that I can still understand what's going on in my surroundings. I like it as a background, not as necessarily taking over my entire auditory sensory perception. I want to be able to hear things, and in a lot of cases I don't want the music at all because I want to hear the birds chirping, or if the birds all of a sudden stop chirping, could be a sign that there could be a predator in your midst, and you want to be able to know that. You do not want an apex predator sneaking up on you. And if you're in Georgia or along the Appalachians or somewhere in the Ozarks, and definitely out there in the Yellowstone area, you could find yourself with an apex predator up on you pretty quickly if you're not paying attention. Low-flying birds may indicate an approaching storm. This is super helpful to know. And certain tracks from animals could be leading you to a water source. So it would be important to know, too, where you have water sources, and we'll get more into water sources when we get down there. And then notice subtle changes in the terrain. Did the soil change color? Did the texture of the soil change color? This can just signal upcoming environmental changes. If you're hiking far up enough a mountain, there's a certain spot where the tree line stops because the temperatures in the winter make it so that trees can't survive. And that would certainly let you know, okay, we're getting definitely up into an area where there's a lot less oxygen, and it's a lot more prone to extreme cold temperatures. And that may not be where you want to camp down for the night. So understanding your navigation, understanding how to observe animal behavior, situational awareness in a 360-degree sphere around you, extremely important whenever you're going out into the wilderness areas, whether it's in, the city like LA has got many places to hike, but they actually do have some wild cats, like big cats out there, mountain lions. And while they're all, tagged and collared and they can track them, it doesn't mean that if you're out there climbing that you could not come across one. So again, even even in the cities, there might still be some animals. I mean, I was hiking the other day, and a couple fox came running around my path. Again, they're tiny, and they're like the size of a small dog, but still, I don't want to get myself into an altercation with a fox. And closing up, wilderness food, survival, shelter. If you're going to forage, know what you're doing. I mean, just know what you're doing. For the most part, we're not in a situation where we might necessarily need to be foraging for food unless you are going to stay out for multiple days. And that's something that you're akin to, is knowing how to locate things that are edible, or you've got an edible book, or maybe you've got an app on your phone that you could take a picture of a plant and it could tell you what it is and whether it's edible. But if you're going to forage, you better know what you're doing. Don't just be like, hey, look at this mushroom on the ground, because that could go sideways on you really quickly. Some people are like, it might be hallucinogenic. That would be fun. I don't know if that would really be that much fun to be hallucinating on a mountain, on a trail that you're not that familiar with, because you just got done eating mushrooms off the ground. So forage safely if you're going to forage at all, because you just never know what plants are toxic and what ones aren't. And oftentimes, if that goes sideways on you, you're going to be in a very precarious situation. If you are somebody who likes fishing, there are definitely fishing poles that you can take apart, put back together, so that they can be in your backpack or attached to the side of it in such a manner that it doesn't take up a lot of space. And a lot of these are extremely light. So if you are going to hike back into the woods to a really cool river so that you can catch some fish, and you're going to clean it and skin it and cook it all up right there next to the river, by all means, more power to you. If that's something that you're able to do where you live, just know that it's, I would think that it's important to know what could have been polluting that river before you did that, and then making sure that you've got the appropriate hooks, line, all that natural bait or whatever you might want to use in order to fly fish or just fish out there in these rivers. Dawn and dusk are going to be some of the best times to catch the fish, but certainly if you're prone to doing hiking and going fishing, you probably already know a lot of this stuff. But if it's an idea like, hey, we're going to come by a river, wouldn't it be cool if we could catch our own fish and eat it? You definitely are going to want to be prepared with a pole that can be disassembled, because you're not going to want to attach a big old fishing pole to your backpack, because those things can be sometimes 6 foot long, and now all of a sudden everywhere you're hiking, that thing's whacking tree branches. So if you think, oh, this will be easy, I'll just carry this fishing pole for the hour-long hike, that could get real old real fast. Water purification, you can get tablets, you can get filtered water bottles. Life straw is something that I know we've talked about on this show before, where you could basically just stick a straw down into stagnant water with a dead deer in it, and you'd be able to drink these things. Test the efficacy of the straw. I would absolutely test it first just in your home to make sure that you're able to suck water through it. Find some stagnant water and, give it a go. Watch some videos, talk to some people here in AmCon about what their experiences are with filtration bottles and life straws and things of that, to make sure that what you're taking out there will work. You can take chlorine tablets and then drop that in somewhere, and that will certainly kill off bacteria. But that being said, better make sure you understand how much of the chlorine tablet or the water purification tablet you're going to put into your water. The amount you put in of water needs to be appropriate for the amount of size of the purification tablet, and you don't want to overdo it. And now all of a sudden you're drinking like over chlorinated water, which actually just dehydrates you and not hydrates you. Building a simple shelter. Again, this could go back to the way that you put your gear in your bag. If you've got a tiny little tent that can fold up real nicely, and all the little poles that were to hold it up also fold up real nicely, and there's a lot of great ones out there on the market, and that could be at the very base of your backpack. And if you use my cardboard separation pattern, then all of a sudden you're able to put that backpack on the side and get that tent out very quickly, so you don't have to make an A-frame with duct tape in the middle of the woods. And you may not think that you're going out and you need shelter, but all of a sudden it starts to rain really heavily and you're sitting there getting wet, and you're thinking, man, it'd be really cool if we could just pop up a tent and sit in it and eat our sandwiches and wait for this storm to pass, rather than sitting in the rain getting soaking wet. So whether you choose to take a tent or not that is extremely portable is is up to you. Just know that, if you can find one that's 5 or 7 pounds and you can carry a 40-pound backpack, it might be appropriate for you to have that in your bag. If you're going on a 4-hour hike up a mountain and there's no potential for rain, more than likely you're not going to need that tent. So you would want to know your weather conditions. You would want to know the conditions of the place you're going to hike. And you just want to talk this through with other people. If your bag can only handle 20 pounds because you're a 100-pound person or a 120-pound person, you're probably not the person who should have the tent in your bag, because you want to be holding your essentials. Everybody should be carrying their own essentials in order to stay warm and dry. And therefore, if you are going to build a fire, know who's going to be carrying those so that there's no separation during the hike if people might need a fire to be started because it gets cold. Whether you take flint, steel, waterproof matches, I would always over prepare on the side of building a fire. So waterproof matches, flint, steel are very lightweight, and everybody can have those in their bag. Most people should have been trained in some regard on how to start up a fire in varying conditions, as well as how to build a pit with rocks and materials from the woods that are around, or how to dig a shallow hole and then put rocks around it. Don't be that person who went into the Rocky Mountains and started a 14,000 acre forest fire because they didn't know how to start a fire, or they didn't put out the fire completely before they walked away from it. So these are just some really great ideas for outdoor skills. Most of this stuff I covered in this month's blogs. We're into the, almost the end of the month now. So about 2/3 of those blogs have already been released. The rest of them are coming, and they're all based off of our categories in the order that I've always put them out in. I want you to go out there. I want you to enjoy the outdoors. I want you to have a good time while you're doing it. And with a little bit of prior planning, you can put yourself in a position to not be desperate for any kind of supplies that could cause your hike, your trip, your experience to be less than what it could be with just a little bit of forethought. So when you're ready to prepare, grow, and share by building the skills, the network, and the confidence to be prepared for whatever comes next, like going outdoors and hiking, or the American Contingency Adventure Challenge, which is coming up in so many regions, go to AmericanContingency.com. Check out the information that we put on the front of the website. Join, be a member. Again, it's very affordable. There's a slew of information. You got to hear Sam talk about it last week. You're going to hear a couple more members talking about it in the upcoming weeks. We're doing this for you. We do this for us. We do this so that we can be an entire country of prepared and informed and ready to grow citizens who can be self-sufficient and also understand that the person next to them is somebody that can be relied upon, and that's what American Contingency brings to you. So we're here when you're ready, and we'll keep the fire going so you can find your way. Talk to you next time. Goodbye.